Low level disruption is a misnomer because if something is happening all the time, it's interrupting your teaching, it's impacting the learning of every other child in the room. That's not a low level problem. Most classrooms don't struggle with behavior because of big incidents, although they might happen infrequently, but they struggle because of constant low level noise, movement, calling out, fidgeting, chatting, and it's all day, it's every day. Now, there isn't a magic bullet for this, but there are golden rules and principles, things that you must do. And if you do, low level disruption almost disappears. And I've observed many teachers, some officially, some I've just been in the class and I've kind of observed them while I'm there. And it usually only takes a few minutes to understand why behavior is an issue, why there is this low level disruption. And it's rarely about the children, as much as, of course, it is the children who are causing the disruption. But it's about certain things the adults are doing or certain things that the adults aren't doing. And let me give you the things that I think will absolutely make a difference. So number one, know exactly what you want and let the children know that. Not vaguely. Vagueness is what causes the problem. So not things like, it's getting a bit noisy in here, or, oh, our behavior is not very good. Even things like settle down, it's not clear enough. If you want silence, for example, say this task needs to be done in silence. Get them to see what silence feels like, what silence sounds like. That's the standard that we're looking for. If it goes above that, there's going to be issues, If you want hands up, tell them, I won't respond to anyone who doesn't put their hand up. And then make sure you don't respond to anyone who calls out. If you want everyone to look at you before you start giving an instruction, tell them that and wait for it. Because children can't meet expectations that they don't know are expectations, right? If they don't clearly understand what they're meant to be doing, then there's problems. Ambiguity creates the noise. And I've seen this, you'll see it the most where children who aren't behavior children, if you like, children that will always want to do the right thing and will do the right thing, are still talking and the teacher saying people shouldn't be talking, are still walking around, and then the teacher saying, why are people walking around? And you know that that child would not have done that if they knew they weren't meant to. So clearly it just wasn't clear enough to them. Number two, and it's similar, it's linked, never give an instruction when children aren't listening. That might sound obvious, but you've got to aim for 100%. And if you can gather the children in, make sure they're listening, there's nothing in their hands, they're silent, they're looking at you, and then you give an instruction, even in that ideal scenario, some of those children will be daydreaming and not listening. It'll be going in one ear and out the other. And that's in the perfect scenario where you've got them all to stop, look at you, have no distractions in their hand. So imagine you don't do that. Imagine you're talking when some children are still writing. Some children are walking around sharpening their pencil and you're giving an instruction. Some children are still whispering to their partner. Half the class probably, in that case, haven't really heard the instruction. And that obviously only leads to problems later. But more importantly than that, if you speak and children are allowed to carry on kind of whispering and chatting, you are actually telling them that is okay. You're actually training them and conditioning them that listening is optional when you start talking. So I always say aim for 100%. You're not going to get 100% listening, but that is a standard you're aiming for. And if in your mind, you're thinking to yourself, I want every single child to hear this so that I don't have to repeat it, so that I don't have to have more behavioral issues later dealing with this. And if you've got that in your mind, you won't give an instruction when it doesn't feel like they're definitely all with you. And it doesn't mean shouting over them, but it might mean waiting, scanning, pulling out those children that aren't ready, and not carrying on until you've got what you want. Of course, you use the positive a lot of the time. I love that I can see that, Red Table are all listening. Thank you so much, James and David. And then just checking, okay, Sally, it's just you now. And then you carry on. Now, obviously, I wouldn't wait for children all the time, and I wouldn't always just name those children, because at some point you've got to say, I don't want it to be you next time. Yeah, if it's Sally, next time, Sally, can we not have to wait for you, please? I don't want you to be the last one. And pull them up on that to create that culture that really, if I say we're all stopping and all looking at me, I'm not having to then pick on 17 different children, because I should only need to say it that one time, as long as you've given it clearly enough and you've given them enough time to respond, put their pencil down and look at you. So that one is very important. Silence before instructions every time, and it will make a huge impact on everything else. Number 3, make everything clear before the task, because each individual task will have different requirements, even linked to behavior. For example, you might have a task where you want them to work with a partner. So that's fine. You let them know. You can talk to the person next to you. I don't want to see people calling across the table, and definitely not from one table to another. But the noise volume is you're talking to the person next to you. It might be that they're using something they don't usually use, a laptop, an iPad. Be specific on the instructions linked to the use of that. And obviously explain, if they aren't able to use that sensibly, it will be taken from them. Okay? Tell them your expectations. They should know exactly what to expect for the specific task, what you'll allow, and what will happen if expectations aren't met. And it sounds long, like, am I going to do that for every task? But you know what? It's going to save you time long term. Not only because in that lesson, you'd end up spending time having to talk to children about all these things that weren't clear enough to them, but definitely long term, they're going to understand the conditions. And there'll be some lessons where you're not saying the whole thing again. You're just saying, this is just like the lesson earlier. This is just like in English when we worked in silence, and so on. Because I say this to the children, and it's true for adults. Rushing makes things take longer, because you make mistakes, you have to do it again. And it's the same for this. Rushed clarity creates more disruption in the long term. Number 4, follow through on what you say. And it links to everything we've just said. If you've set up these conditions, that this is going to be silent work, then as soon as one child speaks, you pick up on it. Yeah, it's like, Sandra, you're speaking. Do you remember we said silent? Do you remember? Don't speak again, okay? Or you'll have to work on your own. And then you carry on, and you really pick up on everything that is not what you said. And if you just say sort of things like, oh guys, that's not silent. Oh, remember I said silent. No one really cares. No one has enough reason to take you seriously. Whereas if you pick up on that first child that starts speaking, you address it in front of everyone. You're not trying to shame them, but in telling them clearly, and you can be kind and patient, you're also reminding the rest of the class. And that's why I think that I would never want to publicly shame children, but there's a very good reason that sometimes you say something to one child in front of everyone, so you don't have to say it to 30 children one at a time. So, as I said, it doesn't need to be dramatic, it doesn't need to be emotional, but it's consistent. You've said what you've said, and you're going to follow through. If you said this is the standard and this is the consequence, follow through. Because children test. They test you. They test the follow through. Number 5 is to give a task-based target. Children need something concrete to focus on, a clear outcome. Yeah, a success criteria, a challenge that they are working towards. Because if they're genuinely cognitively engaged, they don't really have the spare bandwidth to be messing around. And if they feel a little bit time constrained as well, which is a good thing, then they'll spend less time messing about. And you can link back to it. You might say, I want everyone to have done at least 5 sentences today by the end. If you're not at 5 by playtime, you're going to have to keep going. And then you will just go around in that first few minutes and sort of say, okay, brilliant. I can see that most of you are going to be going to playtime on time. And then you might just want to pick up on 1 or 2. And that one, I would say you don't have to do publicly. You could quietly go close to them and say, Harry, you might want to speed up a little bit because I need you to get to 5. And Harry will lock in and he won't be chatting to his friends and being disruptive. And in a way, none of this is flashy, none of it's revolutionary, but when these principles, when these basics in the classroom are applied consistently, then the low-level disruption, it stops dominating the lesson. And then teaching becomes the main thing you're doing, which is the goal, right? It will improve because the adults lead with that clarity, that consistency, and that intent as well, being intentional. So it's not kind of vague and then they don't know and then they get themselves in trouble. So hopefully all of that is useful. If you are a school leader and low-level disruption is something that's affecting teachers and classrooms, and it will, of course, affect academic, not just for the children who are misbehaving, but for the others whose lessons are being kind of disrupted, whose learning time is being limited because teachers have to keep stopping. So if this is of an interest to you, it's draining staff energy, then this is exactly the type of work that I do with schools. I can run a session like this, obviously much more detail, and we can look at low-level disruption in particular. The link to work with me is in the description. You can book a call or follow my Instagram, send me a message there, and we can go from there. Hope that was useful. I'll see you in the next video.